Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. It is time for your Friday recap and a moment of Zeneca with the one and only Zeneca.
Hello. Good to be back.
It was easier when you had the 33. Like saying Zeneca 33.
Zeneca 33.
Somehow felt more natural than just saying.
You can still say it. I think
Maybe
it's still in my Substack at the moment.
Okay.
Zeneca 33.
That's true. Yeah. I can picture that in my inbox. Okay, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. I mean, obviously the big news is going to be Azuki, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a couple projects at the top that are minting that folks are stoked about or have minted. And then I have an interview, a little short interview we're going to air at the end of this with the NFT Asian. Folks might know him on Twitter, where we talk a little bit about some of what's happening in Japan with NFTs and also with crypto. There was some news that caught my eye that I wanted to chat with him about. And I'm also just trying to cover some of what's happening in Asia, or by cover, like just understand myself what's happening in Asia a little bit better. So stay tuned at the end for that. A couple of administrative announcements as well. I've been saying this, but I want to make sure everybody hears me. We are so close. The gin has been bottled. So Overpriced gin is so close to being ready to ship. It has been bottled. It is en route to a warehouse from which it'll be shipped out to folks. So please stay tuned. You know, like, the redemption window is going to open very soon for being able to claim your bottles of gin. And then we have an event. Our next Overpriced Happy Hour event is in Los Angeles on July 7th with Betty NFT. You can go to opjtour.com now to go claim your tickets for that. That is open to all OPJ NFT holders, all Deadfellas asset holders, and also all Nouns Builders NFT holders, because they are a sponsor of this next event. Thank you so much, Nouns Builders. And so you are also able to go and reserve your seat. Okay. We are going to get to the news real soon here, but we do first need to hear a word from our lovely sponsors who make this show possible. Y'all know I think one of the most powerful use cases for NFTs are loyalty programs, which is why I'm so excited about our latest partner, GALXE. That's GALXE. GALXE is a leading platform for building a Web3 community. It is a no-code, plug-and-play solution to create task-based campaigns and loyalty programs. With over 67 million users, GALXE has worked with folks like Optimism, Polygon, Arbitrum, and more than 2,100 other partners with reward-based loyalty programs of their own. And I'm especially excited to announce their latest product offering, GALXE Mintlist. Mintlist enables NFT projects to issue allow lists based on different user profiles. It's free to use, and projects can then take advantage of GALXE's other offerings, like Task and Quest, which incentivize audience growth and user retention in the long term. Go beyond the mint and keep using GALXE's infrastructure to reward users through on and off-chain actions. GALXE's goal is to help projects grow in an authentic way and help them retain their users and communities over the long haul. And as a user, you can start contributing to your favorite Web3 communities today, joining allow lists through Mintlist and earning rewards, NFTs, oats, tokens, and points. Go to galaxy.com right now, that's GALXE.com right now, or click the link in the show notes to get started. Your Web3 community is waiting. I am so excited to announce that this year, Overpriced JPEGs has partnered with OPENSEA, the world's leading NFT marketplace, built for everyone, creators, collectors, noobs, and experts alike. I'm an OPENSEA user because they have the best selection of NFTs and a truly inclusive view of the ecosystem, supporting 8 chains and 8 global languages. I trust the systems they've put in place to keep the space safe, like copyright protection, malicious URL detection and removal, robust verification, and more. It's why they are the place to buy, sell, and create NFTs. That's right. You know OPENSEA, you use OPENSEA, but did you know that OPENSEA now has drops? New exclusive projects launch every week from top projects and creators, and you can check them out now using the link in the show notes. They also recently introduced self-serve drops, which is in beta, and allows creators to launch their projects right on OPENSEA. This drops product gives creators access to tools like rich storytelling drop pages, multi-chain support, and drop mechanic customization. The full launch for self-serve drops is coming this spring. So check out the upcoming drops on OPENSEA right now using the link in the show notes and own what moves you. You'll also be supporting the show in the process. Okay, before we get to the truly big story about Azuki, of course, I want to just touch on a couple of fun projects that we've been tracking. I know you've been getting into Ordinals. I've been excited about Ordinals. There's this Ordinal Maxi Biz project. Yeah. Is it just mint or it's about to mint? Where are we?
So they've minted. So like they had a mint today. Basically,
okay.
they've minted
Thursday,
previously.
June 29th.
Yep, Thursday 29th. They had previous inscriptions, Ordinals out there. And they had a really high floor price. I want to say like 3 or 4 Bitcoin for the OGs. And then this is like their whatever, that's follow-up mint where they try to expand the ecosystem. They gave a lot of allow list spots out to their current holders and new members. And it minted out today. I'm pretty sure the mint price was 0.09 Bitcoin. I know that they were talking about like different prices for different tiers, but just based on like something I briefly saw, I think that's what they did, just a flat mint price, and it's trading at like 0.33 Bitcoin now, which is great to see.
This is where it's happening. Like this is where it feels like it feels like 2021 again. I mean, look, it's not as if there aren't projects on ETH that haven't had their little pump. You know, you had your Nakamigos, you had your Al-Asky. Like you've had these projects over the last few months that have done their little pumpy thing, but it does not feel the same as what's happening on Ordinals, which feels much more akin to earlier day Ethereum NFTs. Do you agree?
Yes and no. So I definitely agree that there are more crazy things happening where you mint and then it 10x's, or you mint and then you just make $5,000 or $10,000 in an hour or two. That happens on Ordinals, and that's basically unheard of on ETH lately. It hasn't been that way for a while. That said, it's still very exceptional on Ordinals. So whereas in the early days of ETH 2021, it was like literally for like 4 months, anything you minted would just go up. Like anything half decent would just go up. It was the wildest time. On Ordinals, I think already there's been this flurry of like people coming to just cash grab, capitalize, and extract, where they're like, oh, Ordinals is the new hot thing. Let's go launch a project, hype it up, try and give out collabs, mint it at 0.002 Bitcoin, and all right, that's still adds up, and then try and make $500,000 or a few $100,000. And so it's different in that sense that you got to be very, very careful still and very selective. And I would say the vast majority of things minting out are not worth picking up, but there are still the opportunities if you take the time to dig in and understand the ecosystem and know which projects to pay attention to, and then are like able to get on the allow list to mint. There's a lot of hoops and stuff, but again, for the true ordinal community, from what I can see it as well, like I've only really been digging in for like the last 3-4 weeks now. There's sort of like the OGs, and then there's like the new wave of people that are coming in to extract. And for the OGs, I think they're really good about trying to expand the ecosystem and give out like allow list spots and allow people to mint who are genuinely showing an interest in joining, or they'll give it like to their holders. What OMB did was for some of their they would give them like 8 allow list spots, and a lot of those people ended up just raffling them off or giving them out to the people that they know that would make the community better. So I think that there is this really cool movement happening on Ordinals, and if you can tap into that and be part of it, it can be fun, exciting, lucrative. Community, it's all these great things, but it's like a minefield to navigate because there's so much junk already on Ordinals.
Clogging up that Bitcoin network with all our junk. That's what we do. Drive up gas prices. That's the
JPEG
NFT
way.
Specialty. That's the JPEG way. Do you own any Ordinals at this point? I haven't read I read your first Ordinals blog post. I haven't read the second one yet. They're both fantastic, your Substacks. So if you said that, I'm sorry that I don't know.
No, I don't know what I said in it. Again, it's you're right. I own like a handful, so I've been really careful because I didn't want to just go in and FOMO, especially because I knew that. So 2 things. I've come to learn that I'm a top signal now. So like when I'm getting when I get into something, I'm like, oh, because the people that spend 16 hours a day in Discords, they got in 3 months ago, and that's again, I knew that this happened with Ordinals because in February I was like, Ordinals, oh my god, this is huge. And so now that I'm like properly taking the time to get in now, I'm like, all right. People were early. I'm sure things are inflated, and there's this. So I was like, I'm not going to just go crazy and FOMO in. That said, there are some projects that I found that I just really liked, and it's mostly the art stuff. I think that the most obvious use case for me on Ordinals as inscriptions is art, and generative art is very, very cool. I mean, I'm just art blocks maxi, as everyone listening to this will, I'm sure, know. So there's a platform called Imagine Art, I think it is. It started by a few people from the generative art community. Proper is one from Artblocks, and I can't remember the others. But they've released a few collections which are really interesting, and I mean, it's on-chain generative art on Bitcoin, which is kind of wild. And so I got a couple of those. What's it called? Lauren Bednar's project. I can't remember the name. Refractions, it might be. And then Nullish has a bunch of collections. Nullish is one of the OG artists.
And did OBM is part of the OBM one we just mentioned.
Yeah,
Nullish
so
and
that's a project by ZK Shark and Nullish. And so Nullish has a bunch of art projects out there. So I picked up a couple of their pieces, and one or two other. I have a Sattributes, which is a project that was sort of they're giving it out to builders in the community and stuff like that. And but I'm like curious, but again, not trying to FOMO into too much stuff.
Smart. I did re-up. I had stopped, and I'm like kicking myself, of course. I had stopped my recurring Bitcoin buy like kind of a while ago, and I had sort of doubled down on some ETH recurring buys, and I finally reversed that and like kind of, I'm still DCAing into ETH, but I made it less so that I could allocate some to Bitcoin. Because I'm just kicking myself. I'm like, damn, with some of the ETF news coming out, which obviously is to a degree priced in at this point, and Ordinals, like I'm just becoming more bullish on Bitcoin again.
Me too. Yeah.
Are you do you DCA in?
No.
Do you have like recurring buys on any of it?
I don't. I should. I don't. I just sporadically I'm like, I should get some more Bitcoin, and then maybe I'll sell some ETH and buy that and like just reshuffle. It's very unscientific, but yeah.
See, I get stressed by that. I feel like your gambling
right. Yeah, I'm just used
background. You feel like I like really just I could never be like a poker player. Like I can't handle the stress. So I just need it like locked scientifically and just like not.
That's the smart way. I'm like always telling people to like my advice. I don't take my own advice ever. It's do as I say, not as I do. I'm telling people DCA in. I don't DCA in. I'm telling people all this other. I don't do that. It's just like.
Yeah, but you've clearly done well. I mean, so you're
but
fine.
Sometimes
Whatever
you get
you're
lucky.
Doing, yeah, not for like 2 years though, dude. You know what I mean? Like you clearly are. Whatever, you're good at whatever you do.
It worked out.
It works for you.
Yeah.
Okay. The other project, moving on over to the Ethereum ecosystem, is Ether, which I mean, I don't know. Really, that's the name of your NFT project. So the name of this NFT project is Ether. The thing that I found interesting about it, you're going to give us a little bit more of the history here, but they have this funky mechanism where you can either buy it, you can mint it, and the mint is happening this week?
Today or tomorrow.
Today? Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Something, yeah. And
tomorrow.
You can either
Friday.
pay to mint it, or you can get it for free, and then there's a 10-week lockup period. So you can't sell it, trade it for, I believe it's 10 weeks.
It is. So like there's a few components to it, and it is a little complicated. So I think I'm getting it right, where originally the mint price was going to be 1 ETH, and then they dropped it to 0.65 ETH.
And that was a while. That was like a long time ago.
Like months ago, months and months ago. So 0.65 has been the mint price for a very long time. That's the public mint price. So it's a 10K collection, and I think 8,000 or 8,500 are going to be public. And then there's 1,500 that are on an allow list. And so if you're on that list of 1,500, you can either mint for 0.35, or you can lock it up. You can mint for free, but then it's locked up for 10 weeks. That's the gist of it.
Okay, so it's not like everybody can have that choice. It's specifically for this select group of people that are on this allow list.
Yes, and I think tomorrow is only for the people on the allow list to mint, and then I think there's like a week gap before the public sale, which is kind of curious.
I was going to say that makes the incentive to take it for free higher, but 10 weeks is such a long time. Like it's so much longer than that.
It's a long
really
time.
Matter. What would you do if you were on the allow list?
I mean, I guess it would depend on like my intentions. Like if I wanted a max profit, I think I would take it for free and try and flip it.
You don't think it would just be dead after 10 weeks? Feels like all these things.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I would mint for 0.35.
Yeah,
I would
that's
mint
what I
and
was
then try and
thinking,
flip it during the hype cycle.
That's what I would do.
But I'm not too close to I haven't been paying close attention. I know that like there's a really strong, passionate community that's formed around it, so I could see it doing quite well long term. It's really hard to know in this market.
Yeah. I still can't get over that it's called Ether, but
they've
best of luck to those.
They've got the Twitter account at Ether as well, which is kind of
How did that happen?
I don't know. It reminds me of Truth Labs having at Truth.
Yeah, but I feel like that was like Alex has like been in the tech community for such a long time. Like I'm sort of like, okay, I understand that, but like Ether was a thing in like 2016, so it wasn't like somebody who was just like an early Twitter user was going to get it, and then anyway, okay. Let's do it. Let's move on to our main story tonight. Azuki.
Dun, dun.
Womp womp. Also, I should say that we're taking this again because we had to like get our facts straight to record this section because it's kind of confusing. And if you weren't an Azuki holder, myself, are you not an Azuki holder anymore?
No, I had
cleared out of all of them. I know.
sold
I
them
remember this back in the day.
after the Zagabond FUD.
Yeah.
Well, not even FUD. The reality of Zagabond's stuff came out a year and a bit ago. So I sold then, and I have one bean.
You have one bean. Okay.
Yeah.
But you didn't mint an elemental?
No, I didn't. I knew it was going to be like a crazy
Shit show.
Yeah.
I mean, a 10-minute window. What do you mean? You think it's going to be a shit show? And
yeah.
what about 10 minutes said it was going to be absolute chaos? Okay. For anybody who maybe, like us, it turned out, doesn't is a little confused on all the specific details here, I'm going to run through this real fast. So there was the long-awaited, the long-hyped Follow the Rabbit event in Las Vegas. It was the big Azuki event held in Vegas. People were very hyped for it. Prices had been going crazy on Azuki in the lead up to it, or really just like steadily climbing, honestly. Nobody was selling, et cetera, et cetera. There was another check your wallet type moment in which all Azuki holders were airdropped both a Soulbound token that was a little like token that had a little bean on it, and then also a bean that would reveal to be the Azuki Elemental on reveal day. And this all happened, was it on the 26th or so? I want to say.
I think the event was on the 23rd.
24th. Okay, whatever. And then the 26th was when they announced more details about the sale. God, we already looked all this up. Okay, don't worry about the dates, guys. Don't worry about the dates. It doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It's
Let's
all
get
a
to the
blur.
good stuff. It's all a blur. And then, so 10,000 Azuki holders, there were 10,000 elemental beans airdropped that would reveal to be these elementals. Then for the remaining 10,000 Azuki elementals, because there's 20,000 total in that collection, again, we are quite literally following the Yuga playbook to a T. We've got beans, which are their Kennel Club.
Yes.
You've got the Azukis, and now you've got your 20,000 Azuki Elementals collection, which was like the mutant collection. And that, so those remaining 10,000 that weren't then airdropped to the existing Azuki holders were going to be sold to ETH. And there were these, like the sale was happening in these 10-minute increments, like 9 a.m. Pacific time. It was going to kick off where like Azuki holders could go and buy a second Azuki Elemental. And then at 9:10, bean holders were going to be allowed in to try and buy an Azuki Elemental. Well, it was also a Dutch auction, but like and nobody thought it was actually going to even make it to like below 2 ETH because it was just the most hyped thing in the world. And then at 9:10, the general public could go and try and pick up any scraps that were obviously not even going to be left. So you had like 7,600 Azuki holders end up getting to mint a second Elemental, and then whatever it was, 2,400 bean holders or whatever then went in and minted the rest of them out. Okay, those are the facts. Let's get into the reaction. Zeneca, I'll turn it over to you. What did you think of all this?
Let's start with their Vegas event. That looked amazing. I think they did a fantastic job there. Everyone I've spoken to that attended had a blast. It was like everyone was high on life and Azuki and the garden, and it was like they did a really good job there. So leading into this, they're all like they're set up. They're set up for to knock it out of the park. And then there's a series of unfortunate events. And I think two pre-mint ones that I can think of. One is that the 10-minute window is just like, why? And like, I know why, because you want FOMO, and it's like, it's very transparent that like, we want people to rush but it's, when the space is not stupid, the space does not appreciate that. Make it half an hour, you'll still get, and so like that was
still
one.
A ton of enthusiasm, but it won't create the total frenzy that also shot them in the foot because their tech couldn't handle it.
Yeah, exactly. That plus the fact that like there's going to be and people did get scammed, like because 10 minutes people are panicking, they're like rushing to put in their ledger hardware device and it's just like this. That's not the kind of thing you want to encourage in crypto. That's
such a good point, because urgency is always the catalyst for getting scammed, right? It's always that like if somebody's rushing you to do something, that's usually a sign that they are a scammer because they don't have the time to think. But now you created a dynamic where there's this urgency. Yeah. There was still going to be urgency in 30 minutes, but it's a different thing. 10 minutes is tight.
10 minutes is nuts. And then, so the other thing before Mint that was bad was that they hadn't set up like Delegate Cash or Warm.xyz, so people couldn't mint from a wallet that wasn't holding all their valuable assets. Now, to their credit,
I thought they did enable Delegate Cash. That was later.
Like a few hours before, or like 12 hours before, they had said they had worked closely with the team from Delegate Cash and they made it happen. But it was like just lack of forethought and foresight where, I mean, the combination of a 10-minute window and no security measures like that is just not a good sign. So that's like strike 1, strike 2 leading into the mint. Then the mint happens and chaos with the website and all like the tech stack not handling it, but it mints out, and then the reveal.
Which was a couple hours later or instantly after it sold out. It was instantly after it sold out. Again, not that this.
Yeah, I was in back-to-back meetings.
Yeah, I was as well. But there was something that, because they had to put out a statement apologizing for the tech problems. They were like, "Oh, we're so sorry about the tech problems. We hear you, but like, don't worry, we've got this great reveal coming up as soon as it sells out. Like, this is the thing we can all look forward to." And look, I am somebody who doesn't always understand the outrage of this space. In fact, I would say more often than not, I feel like I'm sitting at home being like, this isn't that big of a deal, guys. Y'all need to relax. You know, like that tends to be my reaction. Like all the FUD over influencers and like, you know, the good influencers. I mean, like when people get, what are the things called? Like the freebies, what's like when influencers get free NFTs? There's like a name for that.
Honoraries.
Honoraries, yes. Like, you know, when they get honor, like so often I am somebody who in this space just thinks people just need to relax. I have to say, I was like, no, yeah, this, I cannot fathom. I also tend to be somebody who can like really understand the team, like the team's point. There's so much going on, and I will do that in a minute. Like I will give the Ray Chan speech of like, it is so hard to in this space.
Yeah.
However, what?
Yeah.
Some of the art is so identical. Like it's so undifferentiated. That's where I'm like, no, I get the frustration and the outrage. I don't think it's necessarily overblown, because what was the thinking?
Yeah. And so like I would say the weird thing is, in many ways it's even better. It's like the floor elementals look like the regular Azuki collection. And then you go through and like there's a lot of elementals that look amazing. Like the art is like objectively fantastic, but then you've just upset your original holders because now theirs look exactly the same.
Well, why am I going to pay 10 ETH for a piece of art that I can that I can get for 2 ETH?
Or 17. The floor was like 15,
it
17
dropped
ETH,
precipitously.
and then it just went, God.
Yeah, well, and you know, I heard NFT Stats, I think, made the comparison to WoW and WoW-G, where like some people felt that way. They felt like the WoW GALXE art was even better than the original WoW art. That at least had a particular like
style.
Yeah, exactly. That was the biggest thing. And I heard somebody else say this too, and I totally agree with this. Like, part of why I feel like I understand the outrage is because I actually don't think this was a case where the expectations were unmeetable. You know, you talk about like not infinite regret,
impossible
expectations, which, and again, we'll get here. Every project founder deals with. The space is relentless. It is brutal. But I actually think if you look at the elemental art that's like the animal faces, for example, if you had just released an all animal collection, genuinely, I think it would have gone gangbusters. People would have been thrilled. It would have taken off. Like, I don't think this was a case where there was like a no-win situation facing these folks, despite all of the big hype. I think but there was nothing, or like I saw somebody saying like maybe you could have made them like all like dark, like a villain set.
Right, yeah. Just make them stand out.
You could make it similar, but there needed to be something overarching that was distinguishing. And there was nothing. And so it truly becomes a dilution play. And that's the other thing that was just so strange is like already it's a dilution to an extent. Mutants dilute to an extent. To not foresee that if you do art that is where some of the art is so identical that it's not just such a huge dilutive event. I don't understand how you don't think that through.
I agree. And I just thought of 2 more things, like not to just continue to pile on.
We'll be nice in a minute, but let's get this part out.
Yeah. They literally had identical art. Like there were like 4 or 5 instances where they were exactly the same.
Well, but that wasn't exactly the same to the first collection. It was that within the Elementals collection.
Within the Elementals collection.
Right. So I was confused about that when I first saw it. But basically there was like 5 instances where there was a metadata error on their end. Yeah. And so 2 Elementals were completely identical to one another. So then they were like, oh, it's okay, we'll update the metadata. And then people were like, wait, what? But like, what if somebody bought that, liking that art, and now you're going to update the metadata on them? Sorry, I cut you off.
And actually, no, I'm going to go deeper on this point, because there was this kind of a tangent, but like I saw this Twitter thread like 2 or 3 months ago about an Azuki holder kind of like pleading for attention because they have OCD and they're a perfectionist, and on their Azuki there's like a single pixel that's like the wrong color and it's out of place, and apparently they wouldn't change it because they didn't want to update the metadata, and it's like that is, and like I'm remembering, so they could be getting these facts wrong, but like that is what and then now they're going, oh fine, we'll just update it. It's anyway, yeah. Oh yeah, and then the other thing, is that they've said multiple times now that the whole point of this was to expand the garden, invite more people in, and all that kind of stuff. And then they gave 10,000 to Azuki holders and sold another 7,500 to Azuki holders and 2,500. Like there's no way that was going to public. It was just, it wasn't about, I'm done.
Totally. Yeah, I'm trying to remember because I remember when I minted my WowG, I had frustrations. There were frustrations around that as well. They're like, oh, you want to grant broader access, but then the way they did that Dutch auction. Oh yeah,
that was all about like, the brand was so about inclusivity and accessibility, and then it was like a 3 ETH Dutch auction.
Which was frustrating, but there was one other thing that I found that I was like, why did they do it this way? But I can't remember now. It's so many things have happened in the space since the WowG mint. Totally, yeah, that's a great point. Like if the whole point of this is to try and expand, and yet you have structured it such that like there's no point in even setting a public mint at that point. Like there was no way this was going to get past those 20 minutes.
FOMO.
Yeah, FOMO, I guess. Let me introduce you to a brand new company that I could not be more excited about. Web3 Sense, a Web3 analytics platform that combines on-chain data with social media insights to give you the deepest, most meaningful intelligence into any NFT community. I have tested other analytics platforms out there, but Web3 Sense has the most comprehensive capabilities I've seen in the NFT ecosystem. They apply sophisticated data science to wallet histories to determine behavioral patterns and help shape predictive analytics. In other words, they can tell you which Twitter accounts are actually the influencers in your space. And they can tell you what resonates most within a community by looking at what other communities' token holders are involved in. The number of use cases here is virtually unlimited. So whether you're a trader, creator, institution, brand, agency, I promise Web3 Sense has data that you want to see with the deep and actionable insights that you need to build, analyze, grow, start, whatever you want to do within the NFT space and in terms of building a business and a community. Now, they are still in very early days, so they're eager to connect with the community. So if you're interested in learning more about what Web3 Sense can do for you and your business, and you should be, go and fill out the very short form linked to in the show notes, and someone from their team will reach out with more information and an opportunity for a product demo. Trust me, you won't regret it. Y'all know I love Ledger, the world leader in critical digital asset security. When you own crypto, what you actually own is a private key that gives you access to your coins. It is imperative that you keep this key safe, and Ledger wallets are the best way to do that. The Nano S Plus and Nano X Ledger wallets, paired with the Ledger Live app, give you the best way to start your crypto journey while maintaining full control over your digital assets. Send and sign your NFT transactions with full transparency in the Ledger Live app. What you see is what you sign. And y'all have heard me talk about Ledger Stacks before. Well, due to unprecedented demand, Ledger has received all the Ledger Stacks pre-orders that it can fulfill through summer 2023. And so they have decided to pause the pre-orders. Ledger is incredibly grateful for the community's support and is working hard to get current pre-orders out and ready to ship so that they can make even more Ledger Stacks to keep your digital assets secure. Sign up for the Ledger Stacks waitlist and be the first to know when Ledger Stacks are available again for pre-orders. But don't leave your digital assets susceptible to breach or hack in the meantime. Order your Nano S Plus or Nano X today by visiting shop.ledger.com or clicking the link in the show notes. How bad do you think this is for Azuki? And I want to frame up that question this way, which is, this is a project that has dealt with bumps in the past. Obviously, the Zagabond history reveal was a big bump at the beginning of last year. And other projects have obviously gone through bumps. The Other Side Mint was a disaster. And yet this feels like it shows a lack of judgment that feels deeper than Zagabond was involved in past histories that people didn't, past projects that people didn't like. It feels deeper than even the Other Side Mint, if I'm being honest, in terms of how deep this miss goes. And it's also a very different time in the market. Azuki hasn't done that much publicly. So this is like sort of the thing. This was like the moment.
Yeah.
So with that framing, how bad or not do you think this is for the arc of Azuki?
Yeah, I think it's bad. I think it's, like the Azuki community has shown a resiliency and bounce back and thrived in this market after all of the Zagabond's history got unearthed and, some people left, myself included, and then the existing community rallied together. And so they have that tenacity. But what I think is different is that then the product was still excellent. People loved the brand and the execution of Azuki. And I think we even probably spoke about it on the show at the time, was like how good Azuki had been at executing and delivering, and the art was so good, and the experience and the lore and the story, everything they had done was so good. And I think that was so much of the brand. And now at this point, it's just like, it's a series of errors and chinks that I think people were completely thrown off by and not expecting from Azuki. And so I would say it's kind of, to me, I think of it like it's kind of in between the other side mint and the Moonbird CC0 announcement. It's like those are two big events, and this is like kind of in the middle where like after Moonbirds, that was like, it was still recoverable, I think, but then there was like a series of additional things that the community didn't like after that, and the Moonbirds ecosystem, unfortunately the price suffered a lot as a consequence. Whether that happens for Azuki, I think now depends on what happens next. I think that because the community has shown a resilience, to me it's like, and I've seen this sentiment echoed on Twitter a bunch, it's like a lot of people are like, I'm willing to stay for the community, I'm going to give it one more chance, but like this was not good, I'm very unhappy. And so like I think the onus really is on the team now to really turn it around. Last thing I'll say is that Azuki is, I think, quite exceptional to every other major project in that over the last year, the unique holder percentage has been dropping a lot. Like I think 2,000 unique holders left, but the floor price went up. And that's because they have these whales with crazy deep pockets that will spirit down, they'll buy grails, they'll buy above floor, and they'll spend a lot of money. And so if they're happy and willing to back it, the project can still thrive. But I know a lot of them are unhappy because the elementals kind of diluted their rares. People spent up a lot of big bucks to buy a rare Azuki, and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of elementals with the exact same trait that now is not good. So it really depends on the team.
And not just that, the whales are the folks who went in and bought up a ton of the NFT, a ton of the elementals in that first 10-minute window that are all now trading under their mint price. So Azuki...
Not by much, though. I think that's still around mint for the elementals themselves.
Isn't it like 1.9, 1.7 or something, and they mentioned it too?
Yeah. So
okay, so whatever. So they're a little bit under. They're hardly under. But the point is, like, they haven't made money on them, and they're like at just under break even, I guess, for a lot of these, which is not a great way to keep a whale happy. And it means that the whales don't have suddenly a new influx of cash in which to buy back.
Yeah, and a lot of these, and the Azuki price dropped so much that they would have had a lot of exposure.
Well, and there's that too, right? So a lot of these whales were big holders. All the prices fell, which look, there was going to be the Azuki price was going to fall a bit because it's, by the rumor sell the news, like there was always going to be a drop, some level of drop off, but we're seeing, over 30% falls in prices. I mean, that's intense. The other thing is, and this is something that Sam NFT Stats covers a lot and covers well, is like, the number of holders who are listing on Blur for the very first time and selling into bids on Blur and who are buying them. He was looking at that and saying it's a lot of Blur farmers who are the ones who are buying the Azukis right now. And the dynamic that he has described a lot is that once it goes into the hands of the farmers, it becomes this like slow spiral down because the farmers will flip. They're just trying to get the points, right? And so I think there's a world where there's actually more pain to come here as some individual holders have started dumping for the first time into bid holders. Like that was a thing for a little while, why the Azuki price was staying up, of course, because there was the promise of the Las Vegas event. But tactically speaking, like relative to apes, for example, way more ape holders were for the first time dumping into Blur bids and had been for the last couple of months, and Azuki holders weren't. And now that dynamic has changed. So I think there's like a potentially slow, like Blur enabled descent to come still as these farmers start to flip.
Yeah.
Who knows? I think your comparison to the CC0 news and the other side mint is interesting. So you're saying Other Side Mint was not as bad, CC0 was worse?
Yes, I think so.
So here's the, and maybe it's just that I track the Proof and Moonbirds community a lot more closely than I track Azuki in some way. But I also partly feel like they're just louder. Am I wrong? Like, I feel like Azuki is very good at managing their whales, and it's sort of, it's a more private community. It feels like more of a black box than Moonbirds. Do you feel that way, or is that just me?
I think it's maybe different circles. Like, I think
okay.
Twitter during Twitter echo, but it's hard to say. I think
it's not my Twitter echo chamber. That's probably totally right.
Yeah, and for the record, like when Moonbirds went CC0, I was thrilled as a Moonbird holder. I was like, this is awesome. I love this. Like my first gut reaction was, this is a really great thing. But then talking to others, hearing like the whole, during and months after Mint, when people weren't expecting it and literally having like their IP rights changed on them, was like, that to me was more significant than this, which was IP
rights changed when people thought they had the IP. So here's the only reason it feels different to me. And again, this could be because I'm just more tapped into Proof and Moonbirds. It always felt to me like Moonbirds was more move fast and break things. And they were like, hey, we started as this collective and now, we're going to launch this PFP, and oh shit, now a lot of people want this PFP. So like, now we're going to figure out something to do with the PFP, and like, we're going to make it felt very, it felt like it had that energy. So while I think the CC, and it felt like there were a lot more announcements coming out. Like there was a lot of things they were doing. It was Mythics, it was High Rise. Like there was just a lot of different kind of information. There was proof of conference. And obviously all of those things in turn then fell by the wayside, which is what has contributed to the decline in price and things in that community. But it felt like there was a lot of activity happening. It wasn't like everything was riding on any one moment. Yeah. And so when the CC0 announcement came out, while I agree with you that like it was a real miss in terms of like, you can't just like come in and have told people you've given them IP rights and then strip that away and make this unilateral decision. It feels very anti-Web3. And so I think it was really bad from that standpoint. It felt more recoverable to me because there was a lot more going on. It was one announcement. Okay, it was a missed comms. This feels more like this is their mutants. Like this is this major moment that has been built up to. There hasn't been a ton of other announcements and it doesn't feel as fly by the seat of your pants in some ways. It feels much more like we're this really mysterious, powerful IP along the lines of a Yuga, right? That has this bigger plan that we're cooking on, and you don't quite know what's cooking behind us, but we're really good at executing. Like it has this mystique, at least to me, that, and then this is your moment. And then not only did you flubbed on all of it, you flubbed it technically, you flubbed it sort of comms wise by just jumping in and being like, we're going to change metadata. Yeah. And you flubbed the fundamental thing that's supposed to be your thing, which is like the art and the allure. So it feels much bigger to me than the CC0 announcement for those reasons. Do you disagree with any of that in terms of like, am I just not seeing enough Azuki chatter and announcement talk?
I don't know is the answer. Like, I think that we need to see like a year out from now how it plays out is really like the even at the time, the CC0 thing, like now looking back, it seems like, all right, that was kind of like the first in a series of dominoes that led to bad things happening. And at the time, there were a lot of people against it, but there were a lot of people that were like, all right, the way they did it, as I remember the narrative, people, including myself, I think, were saying the way that they went about making this change was terrible, but the fact that they are now CC0 is not a bad thing. I like CC0. It leads to all these opportunities and positive things and could be good in the long run. And so it was kind of mixed at the time. And I feel like it's pretty similar now or even more so now, where I think the Azuki community is pretty strong and like they're rallying behind each other and the project. And yes, they're upset and they're down bad and they're not happy, but they're supportive in a way that I didn't quite feel it as much with Moonbirds after CC0.
So you're making the argument that they actually have a more fundamental, loyal, bought-in community in some ways.
Yes, I think so.
Which I think is true. And so let's turn to that. So after all of that FUD and obviously me being quite cynical about a lot of this and you obviously as well, let's turn to the other side of this, which is starting with, to your point, they've got an incredibly loyal community that really feels strongly about this art and this IP and this community and this team. And for a lot of good reasons, as we've talked about. The IP for Azuki is freaking awesome and has always been so good from day one. So freaking good. And so I don't think that should be discounted. And if you're thinking about a brand that is endeavoring to, like a Yuga or like a Doodles or like many of these, really transcend just this one space and become something bigger in culture, or whether that be through film and TV or streetwear as they're trying to do, at the end of the day, will it actually have mattered that they totally botched a 20K drop? You know what? Probably not. Now, this goes back to this sort of debate of like catering to holders versus building your bigger vision. And it's the debate that we've had many a time around Doodles, who have sometimes opted for the bigger vision at the expense of their holders. But I think that's a very reasonable argument that, like, okay, you could still achieve this really big thing and have screwed up in a whole number of ways this 20K drop. I do think it puts a chink in the armor of like trusting how well this team executes. Like, that's the thing, is the other side mint was definitely a mess, but it was a smaller scale mess. And otherwise, I think they've proven their ability to execute really, really well and sort of like an A team. And so it feels like this puts that into question a little bit with the Azuki team. But again, like, long track record before this that shouldn't be discounted.
Yeah. I mean, going back, I would say the other side mint was worse. Like, that was, to me, catastrophic. It was, in terms of money lost, gas wasted, the impact on,
just
to me,
so
that
unoptimized.
It was just like, I was flabbergasted that they did that. And this was at a time when gas optimized contracts had been out for a long time. And I understand that there are valid reasons for not using those contracts, but still, it was just, there were a lot of ways they could have done things better. And that was a $200 million gas fee plus, the $1 billion or whatever mint that they made out of it. So I think that was worse in terms of like impact to the entire space, and in many ways it literally marked the top of the NFT market.
It just took all the liquidity down, and then we had everything just crashed. Okay, but so in a macro sense, yes, but in terms of judgment of the team, like, it was, they justified, because they didn't really apologize for it, I remember, which was also part of the thing that was a little frustrating, was they didn't really take ownership over it. But I can't remember, did they give justification for why they had an unoptimized contract? Because to me, that was like, again, it felt like one mistake. It felt like, okay, you didn't optimize your contracts, which, to your point, is massive, because it literally was like 150 million ETH or something, dollars worth of ETH that was burned in fucking gas fees, which is just disgusting. But I think they did have some sort of reasoning behind why they had done it that way. It felt like, okay, that you made a mistake, but like, it was a misjudgment, but it was a big one, but it was one. The thing with this is it just felt like it was so many. Like, at least people were relatively, and again, maybe I'm misremembering, but like relatively happy with the other side deeds. You had the codas. You had a lot to kind of sink your teeth into. You pretty shortly after that had the first trip, and people were really impressed by that. Like, the other execution pieces felt okay.
Yeah, I mean, you guys done so much, so great for such a long time. So I agree, it was like, but then so is Azuki. I don't know. Honestly, I think Azuki will be fine and great. Yeah.
Okay. What do you feel like are the big execution things that Azuki has done really well?
Like, the IRL events always are amazing. That people say. Merch, I think that they just have some of the best merch out there. They're really tapped into their community. I think they gave like for free and stuff. And not that these are like massive, massive things, but when you're building an IP brand, IRL events and merch and branding and online badges and all these kind of things add up. And I think that they're really good at that world building, storytelling, lore, narrative, as well as sort of keeping their community and holders happy up until very recently.
This moment. Yep. Okay. I think you're right. And again, that gets back to my point one in this, which was like of the positive side, which is, if you're trying to build something that transcends even just Web3, they've done this does not have to be the end of the world, right? And to your point, like, they've indicated that they want to make this right to holders in a whole different ways. Oh, we didn't even talk about green beans.
Oh yeah.
So as part of, was this something that in your mind, did this come after as part of sort of this apology?
Yeah, it was in the same breath, basically. They apologized and also said, again, check your wallets or something to that effect. And honestly, I would not be surprised if, like, in their emergency 12-hour all hands on deck figuring it out. They were like, let's just make a green one and airdrop it, and we'll figure out what to do next week or in 3 months. Like
they might just create an animal collection. Just be like, all right, let's double down on this animal thing that people seem to like, and the kids. They had some kids in there as well, and whatever. And let's run with it. You're right. I'm with you. I think they have a super loyal community. They have incredible IP. They've done a number of things. They have a track record of doing things incredibly well that are meaningful things. And then this last piece, which I wanted to get to, which was this tweet that Ray Chan made, that 9gag CEO, that did incredibly well, and I retweeted it. I'm debating. I don't want to read the whole thing. People have probably seen it, but it says, like, can I be honest with you? It's damn hard to build in Web3, and it goes on to list a bunch of things. It's very Zeneca-esque. You know, it feels like the kind of thing you will talk about with the infinite regret or the impossible expectations. Like, he's like, when you try something new, people ask you to repeat the old things. When you repeat the old things, people ask you to try something new. When you share more information, people ask for mysteries and surprises. When you create mysteries and surprises, people ask for more information. When you have utility, people ask for art. When you have art, people ask for utility. When you reveal fast, people dump faster. When you reveal slowly, people ask when. And it goes on like that. So you get the picture.
Such a good post. Yeah.
It's so good. I mean, God, Ray is such a damn good tweeter.
He's a brilliant person. Yeah.
He's so lovely. He's just the best. So, And it's so true. And I think it's so powerful coming from him because Meme Land and Captains is on a high. Like, it's doing great. And he even made a joke about that at the end, saying, like, I'm posting this before like the meme token, so nobody can accuse me of like being self-interest. Like, it's nice to have that coming from a founder who's on a high right now and who's being lauded. And I think this is really, really important, which is you basically cannot name a project. I mean, maybe Pudgy's under Luca, but like you can't name a project that hasn't done something that the community has rendered just a complete and utter fuck up, right?
Yeah.
And I happen to think the scale of this one is a little bit bigger than some of the others, but that's totally debatable. Other Side was huge, was a huge fuck up. Moonbirds has had a ton of them. Lord knows Doodles has angered their community maybe more than anybody else. You know, Meme Land didn't sell out their MVP token, like, for on and on. That means this is really, really hard. It means, like, it is basically impossible to just get this right because nobody has. And so I think it's so important to remember that, like, for as much as we can be frustrated and be like, how could people not see that? You know what I'm thinking of is, what was that Azurbala, the Jenkins, the valet? That was another team that had been doing so well and executing so well. Yeah. And then they released that damn Azurbala art. That was the most confusing shit of all time. And just mind-boggling. But anyway, so this is to say, like, I think it's just so important to remember this. And 9gag ended his tweet with a screenshot of a Gordon Goner tweet. Yeah. Clearly, Tropo had been, fudding Yuga, and Gordon tweeted at Tropo, "I don't know, Tropo, why don't you go start an NFT company and get everything right?"
It's one of my favorite tweets of all time because Tropo Farm, he's been an ape since he's an OG, and he's been a massive supporter and a big part of the community, and he's like always been in the Discord, and so I mean there's no love lost, I think, and Gordon is like usually a really kind, friendly guy, and it's just like this one moment when the roles are reversed. Tropo is usually the one, and it's just perfect. It's
so good. You can just see like just snapping, just like Gordon finally snaps, right? It's just like, I'm fucking tired. I've been working 15-hour days. This space is absolutely impossible, and I'm just like, I can't anymore. I don't know, Tropo, why don't you go start an NFT company and get everything right? So you're right. Azuki will rise again someday. I'm not financial advice, but like rise in terms of sentiment and can certainly bounce back from this as many other projects
I think so, but it does depend on like the next step. So I think they're at a very pivotal moment where I believe that they will, like, because the community is so strong and the sentiment is there and this tenacity is there, that it won't take much from the team for the community to go, yes, all right, look, they made a mistake, they owned up, they're doing this, let's rally behind that. But if we see like a few more subsequent missteps from the team, I think that's when things really crumble and fall apart very quickly.
Well, we also shouldn't underestimate the power of the community would like the floor price to go up, right? Like this is the whole thing about shared incentives. Like the whole community would quite literally like this to work out, right? They are rooting, as much as they may be fudding the team or mad at the team, they are rooting for the team. Like they want this to be fixed. So upon a couple good moves, to your point, that like do fix this, you're gonna have folks who are ready to accept that this was a misstep and that change is coming because they all want to because they have bags associated with it. So I think that's a powerful force as well. And I think the Moonbirds comparison here is an interesting one. Like you had the CC0 moment that people were upset about, but they were willing to they were ready to let it go. Mm-hmm. And then you had a number of other things that compounded on that. Mm-hmm. And so the key here is what comes next, and does it compound on this or not? I've had the sense that there was like some bigger master plan with Azuki, which there probably is, or there may still be. I always didn't have the sense ever that Moonbirds like fully knew their bigger master plan. Like, sure, I felt like there was one, but it was a little bit more in flux, or it was a little bit more like, oh, we're going to try different tech products. Whereas with Azuki, I felt like there really was this bigger master plan. So the fact that they released this art, but it wasn't connected to story in any way, apparently, like they didn't come out when everyone was fighting it being like, no, you'll understand this at some point, this is like critical to the broader lore we're building, or like there was no justification for it. It was just like, so how did this decision even get made? Like, what is this tied to? Like, how is this furthering anything other than just being a $40 million cash grab? Which, by the way, and I say cash grab there, but I shouldn't say that, because the truth is, I get it. These projects don't have royalties anymore. They're running these big operations. They want to scale as companies. Like, they have to make money some way. So I don't begrudge projects having to do some levels of dilution at this point in order to get themselves more runway. Like, I get it. That is what you have to do. But I think that was part of it, was just like this, this felt like this moment to me that was supposed to play into some bigger part of the Azuki story in a way that the CC0 announcement didn't. But, and so to miss on something where it felt like it pulled this curtain up in this way where I was like, oh, there's not like necessarily a bigger plan for all of this, or the way that the IP ties in. Mm-hmm. Hey, what is your articulation of the bigger Azuki mission?
I feel like, IP brand is like what they're building.
Sure, but like streetwear first IP brand, or Yuga is a metaverse gaming first IP brand.
Yeah, I would say like anime / streetwear, if that's a hybrid that can go together.
Yeah, I've actually asked this to the Azuki team, and they've said we're creating a decentralized anime universe, I believe was how they had framed it, which is super interesting. And the TAM on anime is massive. Huge. Right? Which is another thing that I think is so bullish about Azuki. And, we'd seen this. Oni 1 is obviously having a bit of a comeback now. And that was like the first, at least in my experience in this space, like Oni 1 was one of the first anime projects that was super hyped, and that came out, and it's such a no-brainer, but then they kind of faltered. So then Azuki really dominated it. And then you had that wave of anime projects that I feel like came out right after Azuki. It became like the thing. Yeah. But I still feel like I don't have like a crystal clear, like I'm like, wait, what does that mean in terms of the priorities? Like, a decentralized anime universe, like all of the top projects, I feel like I can articulate their high-level mission, and then to some degree what that means tactically. And I don't feel like I can do that with Azuki, which again may just be that I'm like in the wrong Twitter echo chamber. but it's always something that's been striking to me about Azuki.
I know that they've got like comics out there. I don't know if they're working on a TV series or if it's IRL events. I don't know exactly like what the tangible things are, but yeah, it's just generic IP type stuff.
We were going to have the Azuki team on, which I'm really excited to do, because again, like I understand that I quite cynical about the way this all played out, but I also think that they've done incredible work and have some of the most amazing IP in the entire space. But understandably, they were supposed to come like kind of shortly after Vegas, and
a little busy.
Like, yeah, we got a couple things in our hands, so we're gonna have to reschedule this. I was like, damn it. Yeah. I was like, this is the perfect time to come on. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So we'll hopefully dive into that with them at some point. But yeah, the next, week, I think, will be really instructive to see what plays out from here. Any bets as to what they're going to do?
No, I'm really curious, because I think they've kind of painted themselves into a really difficult corner where they don't, like, they've got the true collections now and they're so similar. How do you fix that? How do you change that? And on the one hand, I think a lot of OG Azukis are concerned about like the value in what's the difference in holding one? And they can kind of address that by saying, well, you'll get, if we do a higher token allocation, you'll get more perks and more benefits and access and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's so much of the value, especially for Azuki, because the art is so good, of having the PFP and the social status and what that represents. And I don't think they can change either collection now. Like, I just, not in a easy way. So I'm really curious. I don't see a good path out for them in the short term. It's almost like they have to like wordsmith their way out of it and then hope for like a longer term solution to, yeah.
Is there any worlds where they could do something? What I'm thinking about is obviously the original D-Gods art people hated, and so they did the whole Dead Gods thing, and you could change your D-Gods art into different art, and they incentivized you to do that. Now, that was a very different problem, because the problem there was that the art was just bad, and so anybody who held the bad art would almost inevitably want the better art.
Yeah.
The art for Azuki Elementals isn't bad. The problem is just identical to the art that people already have and love. So in theory, you would think, Elementals holder wouldn't trade it in for something else, for an animal elemental or something, because why would they want to give up their cheaper version of a regular Azuki? However, so many of the elemental holders, to the point we made earlier, are just Azuki holders.
Right.
In fact, I would say the vast majority are. Or beans holders or whatever, who want the health of the ecosystem overall. So could they do something, some sort of burn mechanic where you actually go in and you burn the old one to get something more differentiated?
I could see that. I saw something on Twitter that I think maybe is a little more likely, and they thought that these green beans, maybe like the OG Azukis can sort of consume them, and in the process like upgrade. Their Azuki to a better version. And in the one fell swoop, Azuki would be able to upgrade to a new contract that has royalties enforced. And so it could be like this nice win-win. I can't remember who tweeted it because it was a really good thought.
That's a good thought.
If they can do it in a way. But then again, so many people have built their identities around their specific Azuki. How can you upgrade it in a way that A, makes it stand out from the elementals, but B, doesn't change it too much to not upset people that much?
Whose identity is...
But again, giving them the option is always there. Well, you can keep it as is, or you upgrade it, and maybe that's what they end up doing.
All right, well, I guess enough Azuki talk. We will see in the coming week or so what happens. But while we are on the subject of like anime and Asian influence, I've been referencing on the podcast that I'm interested in tracking Asian markets more, or just I should say, like, that's sounds even more ambitious than I am. Like, I just want to understand Asian markets better and really understand what's happening across both crypto and NFTs in different parts of Asia. There was some news that caught my eye this week around some changes to the taxation structure in Japan for crypto. It turns out I sort of misunderstood the whole thing. But this is why it's good that I brought on the NFT Asian is his Twitter handle. He goes by Apesian or Atoza. He is joining me now to talk to me a little bit about the NFT and crypto market in Japan, where he is based. He's an NFT trader in Japan and also has a good following on Twitter, where he's really trying to bridge the gap between Japan and Asia and the Western Web3 world. So enjoy that and enjoy your weekend. Apesian, also known as Atoza in Japan, welcome to Overpriced JPEGs.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So I am really excited to dive into the Asian market broadly, but we're going to focus today specifically on Japan because that is where you are based and you spend a lot of your time trying to bridge the worlds, the maybe Western Web3 worlds with the Asian Web3 world. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to start with a piece of news that caught my attention, which is a change in the tax status for crypto for companies in Japan. You actually pointed out that I think the American translation of this did not get it quite right. What I had read was that companies will no longer have to pay a 30% tax on unrealized gains from holding crypto assets, which taxing unrealized gains in general to me is just a ridiculous thing to do. So I was happy to see this news, and I was going to ask you about what you think the implications of this are for folks in Japan. But it turns out that my understanding of this news was actually a bit flawed. So can you explain what this recent news is really saying?
Sure. So there was a document with regards to the legal changes. I was reading through it, and it seems like this change applied to companies based on certain specific conditions. So from what I've read, seems like there are two main conditions. One is that the cryptocurrency needs to be self-issued by the company. The company itself, the entity itself issued those tokens. And there's a second condition, it's either or. So, and the second condition is there are certain transfer restrictions on the cryptocurrency held. I think part of the transfer restrictions can be technical restrictions that sort of restrict any transfers to other entities. So it's going to be like either of these conditions that if they are met, they would be sort of like exempted from this particular tax.
This specifically applies to if you are the issuer of a cryptocurrency and then there's still these transfer restrictions. It's not quite as broad as the American translated article I had read had made it sound. You read the official notice issued by the government, which of course was written in Japanese, and so I could not understand a lick of it. But I appreciate you clarifying that. There's this narrative in the United States that things are opening up in Asia a little bit. You know, China, there was a white paper that came out of Beijing that seemed favorable to blockchain. You have some moves being made in Hong Kong. And there's a sense in the US that is in part a reaction to the fact that the US is cracking down more on cryptocurrency. I'm curious if you get that sense being in Japan, like if you feel like there's a loosening happening at all, or if Japan feels friendlier to cryptocurrency than maybe they have historically, and if you feel like that's at all a reaction to, if that's happening, do you feel like that's at all a reaction to the US cracking down on it?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's a reaction to the US. I think that, you know, like prior to this moment, there has already been quite a bit of, I would say there's like pretty decent positive reception in Japan in particular. And with the current kind of like legal changes, I wouldn't say it's a big step forward, but it is definitely welcomed by many crypto-related businesses and the broader community in the country. So I think it's more of like a progression over time and not particularly, you know, any reaction. But obviously, you know, in a way you can think about it as Japan is able to capitalize on whatever the US is not capitalizing on.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I figured there was probably some Western centricity to the feeling that, you know, one had to do with the other. I'm sure to your point, like countries will always try and capitalize on areas where other countries are not, but it has more to do with things happening internally than us, I'm sure. So you mentioned to me earlier there was a big wave of NFT activity in Japan in particular earlier in the year, but it seems like it's died down. What seemed to be the catalyst, in your opinion, for the waves and the die downs? What feels like it's driving things?
In Japan, I think there are some industries that have done pretty well in general, especially with the creative entertainment industries. And given how like manga, anime, you know, and the pop culture has huge, massive global demand. I think, you know, given how NFTs kind of like relate to that, there is a lot of excitement, and even leaders from industries, from the government is also seeking to try to position the country to really take advantage of NFTs in particular, given how it can relates to a lot of the native cultural and creative strengths that they already possess.
Yeah, the intellectual property strengths and the character IP strengths, thinking of like obviously Hello Kitty being a super famous example out of Japan, but character culture in general is really strong, and y'all have led the way in that globally in many ways. What are the biggest projects, and when things were popping, what was popular?
I'll prefer not to answer that question.
Well, you don't want to answer which NFTs were popular?
It's a little bit political in Japan. I don't know if you. can relate to that. But if I mention some names, it's yeah. I mean, there are some projects that are not they are very controversial in Japan that became big, and
even to mention them would then be scandalous.
to mention some of them would make it seem that I'm favoring them.
Okay, even if you say clearly that this is not about, you're just stating the facts that they did well, not that you're endorsing them in any way.
Yeah, there's a lot of the kind of perception people will get is it's quite a space, the Japanese market. Yeah.
And so I take it the projects that were getting popular were different than what would be the top projects here in the States, and I'm globally kind of top projects, but like your Bored Apes, your Azukis, Meme Land, like do they have the same resonance in Japan, or it's a totally different dynamic?
The biggest global NFT projects are not that big in Japan. Within Japan, they have their own NFT projects that become really popular locally. Especially in Japan, I think it's important for the founders, the team to be able to communicate directly, so you can build a sort of like a rapport between the team and the community. And a lot of it has to be done in Japanese for that kind of relationship to develop well over time.
That makes total sense. So the other thing you mentioned to me was that Ordinals was starting to get popular in Japan. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I would say a couple weeks ago, a couple of artists in Japan started to get involved with Ordinals, started to issue collections, and more recently, some of the bigger communities have been exploring, launching as well. So that kind of like caught the attention of a lot of Japanese collectors, starting to explore the space, starting to learn about how they can get involved, how they can create the wallets and stuff. So I think it's still in really early stages, but I think there's really strong momentum kind of like building up for a pretty big movement, I think, in Japan. So just to throw out some numbers, I was just like analyzing the Ordinals collections. I was able to find about like 50 to 60 Japanese collections, but just like 2 days ago, I think I saw like 20 new collections appearing just on that day.
Wow.
Obviously, it kind of like fluctuates day by day, but I think that shows that there's a lot of creators that is starting to experiment with Ordinals as a medium to launch their art and their collection. As it stands, it seems like there's a lot of experimentation and a lot of issuing of art just to partake in this sort of like new movement.
Well, I am a Ordinals fan, as people who have been listening to this show know. So I'm happy to hear it, and not surprised that people all over the world are clamoring for this now.
It'll be really, really interesting to see how it develops, considering that Japanese NFTs had its own way from before. Now moving forward, I think as it picks up, I think the global kind of like space will start to pay attention to Japanese Ordinals as it develops.
Well, thank you so much again for joining us today. And folks can go follow you at the NFT Asian on Twitter. And I know I saw you were tweeting about Azuki, so we didn't get into the Azuki news here, but but everyone stay strong out there, I guess is what I'll say.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.